Hello students, myself Archana, and today the topic I'm going to cover is plant kingdom. I know it's easy to relate to the animal kingdom, but I'll try my level best that you'll be able to relate to plants also. So while I'm talking, just grab your NCERTs, open in front of you and take a pen to underline the important lines because NCERT is important. Unnecessary point will not be discussed, but all the important points which come or may come in NEET will not be left. So just focus on the lecture, listen carefully, and your plant kingdom will be prepared. So without delaying, let's start the lecture. What topics we are going to cover in this chapter? The different classification systems and the different kind of plants: algae, bryo, pterido, gymno, and angio. Okay, so before going to the plants, let's discuss the classification systems. That means the systems which were used to divide the plants in different groups. The first system of classification was artificial system. It is the most primitive or old type of classification. It is based only and only on morphology. Every topic has 2 or 3 important lines which come in exam, and the important lines of this topic is that artificial system of classification is based on one or few morphological characters. That means the plants were divided into different groups based only on the external features, only on the morphological features. So it is based only on one or few morphological characters. One important line. Second important line, it is based only on gross superficial morphological characters, the line of NCERT. It is based on all the morphological characters, the superficial characters such as habit of the plant. That means whether the plant is herb, shrub or tree. Color of the plant, number and shape of leaves, these all are the morphological characters. This system used both vegetative characters and the reproductive characters for classification, like androecium characters. Androecium character is the male part of the flower. The androecium, the outer appearance of androecium is what? And the vegetative characters, that means how is root, leaf and stem. So this system used both vegetative and reproductive characters, the morphology of both vegetative and reproductive characters, to divide the plants into different groups. And who were the scientists who used to follow this? Aristotle and Linnaeus. Linnaeus' system of classification is also called as sexual system of classification because he divided the plants into various categories based on the androecium characters. That is why his system is also called as sexual system of classification. Now, what are the drawbacks of this system? The drawbacks is that only morphological characters are taken. So, the species which were very close to each other and should have been put in one group, even they were separated. Even the closely related species were separated because the information used was very little. Okay? Then second drawback was this system gave vegetative and reproductive characters equal importance. You cannot give equal importance to both of them because the vegetative characters, that means how is root, stem or leaf, they change with the changing environment. But the reproductive characters are more conserved. They do not change with the changing environment. So more weightage should have been given to the reproductive characters, but this system gave equal importance to both vegetative and reproductive character. Okay, so this is artificial system. All the lines of NCERT are covered. Hope you have listened carefully. Artificial system of classification is prepared. Then after that comes the natural system of classification. After artificial came natural system of classification, and it used both internal features and external features for the classification of plant. What was taken? and it was based on the natural affinities. This is the line of NCERT. This system was based on natural affinities, means the natural relationships between the organisms. It is not only based on external but internal features such as the ultrastructure, the cell structure, the anatomy, the embryology, and the phytochemistry, the kind of chemicals present in the plant. And very famous scientist Bentham and Hooker system of classification is natural system of classification. And what is good about it? That it gave more weightage to reproductive characters. Artificial system gave equal importance, but it gave more weightage to reproductive characters. And then the most advanced one is the phylogenetic system of classification. It is based on the fossil records. It is based on the phylogenetic relationships. Evolutionary relationships are also called as phylogenetic relationships. That means the evolutionary history, the ancestral history. It is the ancestral history. That means we all have come from apes, the primates, orangutan, chimpanzee, gorilla. We all have same we all have same evolutionary history. We all have common ancestor. That means we all belong to the same group, that is primata. That means all the organisms which have a common ancestor can be put in a common group. So this is based on the fossil records, and this is the most advanced system of classification. But it has a small drawback, that what will happen if there are no fossil records. Okay. Now, several branches of taxonomy. Some important branches are, first is numerical taxonomy, also called as phonetics. How it classifies the plant? Okay. What it does, the numerical taxonomy, it takes all the characters of the plant, okay, and put a digital data along it. Suppose leaf is simple. So this character is given, suppose a plus sign, or suppose it is given a digital code 0. Leaf is compound, digital code 1. So all the characters, they are given digital codes, and they are stored in the software. So with the help of computeric devices, when we write that this particular plant has these characteristics, the software search the whole families and takes out, oh, these characters match with this family. So this kind of taxonomy is numerical taxonomy, where with the help of computeric devices, you can classify the plant by assigning digital codes to the several characters. What is the plus point? That you can take hundreds of characters at a single time. Then comes, after numerical taxonomy comes the cytotaxonomy or the karyotaxonomy. It is based, plants are classified based on the number of chromosome numbers, the chromosome structure, and the behavior of the cell and the behavior of the chromosomes. Then comes the chemotaxonomy. Chemotaxonomy, obviously, when plants are classified based on the chemicals present in the plant. And what are the biochemicals present in the plant? DNA, RNA, protein. So it is based on it is based on the DNA sequence and various other biochemicals like proteins and RNA. And it is based on the crystals also. If some plants, they have calcium oxalate crystals and calcium carbonate crystals present in them, that can also be the basis of classification. And some aromatic compounds. Some plants have a very peculiar smell, and that can be the basis of their classification, right? So out of all the kind of taxonomy, numerical taxonomy, karyotaxonomy, and chemotaxonomy, which is the most reliable, on which you can trust the most? That is chemotaxonomy. This is the most reliable one. Why? Why? Think why? Because it is based on DNA sequence. Okay. So up till now, we have discussed that how we can classify plants into various groups. Hope you have understood. Now, before starting with algae and other plants, let's discuss some important terminology. Because if we don't understand what is sporophyte, what is gametophyte, we'll not understand the whole plant kingdom. So, understand with me. Like us, we have different stages in our life cycle, juvenile phase, adult phase, when we get old. Likewise, plants have two kinds of stages, have two different stages in their life cycle. The name of one stage is a sporophyte and the name of other stage is gametophyte. So all the kind of plants, algae to angiosperms, they have these two phases in their life cycle: sporophyte, gametophyte. Sporophyte is a multicellular diploid body. Okay, multicellular diploid body in the life cycle of plants, on which spores are formed by meiosis. Spores are haploid and sporophyte is diploid. So how spores will formed on the sporophyte? By meiosis. So this is the definition. Remember, sporophyte is a multicellular body, diploid body, present in the life cycle of all the plants, on which meiosis occurs and haploid spores are formed, right? But in case of algae, the sporophyte is unicellular, because in algae, zygote represents sporophyte. Okay? The another phase of life cycle is gametophyte, and that is always a multicellular body, never unicellular. It is a multicellular haploid body. See here, it's a haploid body on which gametes are formed. On sporophyte, spores are formed by meiosis, and on gametophyte, gametes are formed by mitosis. Okay, because the gametophyte is already a haploid body. As you know, that pollen grain is a male gametophyte, and inside the pollen grain, the germ cell ultimately divides mitotically to give male gametes, right? Okay. Now, let's understand what is sporophyte and gametophyte in different plants. Okay, you understood what is sporophyte and gametophyte, right? One is diploid body, one is haploid body. Life cycle, two parts of the life cycle. Gametophyte, gametes are formed. Sporophyte, spores will be formed, right? Now let's go to algae. Imagine a pond. Imagine a pond in which some slimy green colored thing is floating. Sometimes it appears that it's a green cloth. That is the gametophyte of the algae floating in the body. How is that gametophyte? That gametophyte is a thalloid body. It is not differentiated. Have you seen a root, leaf or stem in algae? No. So the dominant phase of life cycle, in algae is gametophyte, right? Which is a thalloid body floating in the water. And the sporophyte in algae is zygote, that is unicellular, and which undergoes meiosis to form spores. Now let's go to bryophyte. Bryophytes are spread over the soil surface. Okay, so the green colored material which you see spread over the surface is the gametophyte of the bryophyte, and which is the dominant phase of the life cycle of bryophyte, right? On the gametophyte, sex organs are present. On the gametophyte, sex organs are present in which gametes are formed. Then after fertilization, zygote is formed, and that zygote forms embryo, and that embryo forms sporophyte, which is a diploid body. But the diploid body never leaves the gametophyte. It is always present on the sporophyte. See, to make you understand, I can draw this, that in case of bryophytes, what happens, they have this gametophyte. They have this gametophyte which is haploid. They have sex organs on the gametophyte, the male sex organ and the female sex organ. The male sex organ form the male gametes. It goes to the female sex organ, fertilization occurs, zygote gets formed, zygote forms embryo, and this embryo give rise to sporophyte. And in case of bryophytes, this sporophyte will never leave the gametophyte, but will always be present on the gametophyte, right? Then in case of pteridophytes, again gametophyte is present. Gametophyte is present on the soil, which is thalloid, not differentiated. It also bears a sex organ, male and female. Then same type of thing, zygote forms, then embryo forms, then embryo give rise to sporophyte. But the difference is this sporophyte will leave the gametophyte and will go into the soil. So in case of pteridophytes, the sporophyte is the dominant phase of the life cycle, right? In case of pteridophytes. So I hope you are able to imagine the thing, how the meaning of gametophyte and sporophyte is changing as we are moving towards higher plants. In case of bryophyte, the green coverage which you see on the soil is the gametophyte of bryophytes, on which fertilization occurs. Sporophyte forms, but that never leave the gametophyte, will always stay on it. But in case of pteridophytes, the gametophyte bears sex organ, fertilization will happen, embryo will form, which give rise to sporophyte, but that sporophyte will get separated from the gametophyte, will go into the soil and will form an independent plant. Pteridophytes are small plants, small heighted plants, herbaceous plants, and this small heighted herbaceous plant is sporophyte of the pteridophyte, which has proper root, leaf and stem. See, sporophyte in algae is unicellular, zygote, but sporophyte in bryophytes always dependent on gametophyte. Sporophyte in pteridophyte is independent, present on the soil and has proper root, leaf and stem. See how the meaning of sporophyte is getting changed. Then in case of gymnosperms, when you go to hill stations, you see large sized trees coming from below the valley. Those large sized trees are mostly gymnosperms. And the large sized tree you are seeing having broad stem, root, leaf, that is the sporophyte of that gametophyte, right? So the large sized tree you are seeing is nothing but the sporophyte of gymnosperm, Pinus, Cycas, Cedrus. Then angiosperms, you see a rose plant this much height, like shrub. You see potato plant, herbaceous plant, very small height. You see eucalyptus plant, very large height. Whatever you are seeing, small heighted potato plant, this much rose plant and the large sized eucalyptus, these are the sporophytes. This is the sporophyte of angiosperm, having proper root, leaf and stem, right? So I hope you can imagine what sporophyte is. In algae it is zygote, in bryophyte it is dependent on gametophyte. In pteridophytes, the sporophyte is a small sized herbaceous plant having root, leaf and stem. In gymnosperms, sporophyte is large sized tree having root, leaf and stem. And in angiosperms, the sporophyte can be herb, shrub or tree. That means algae and bryophyte, the dominant phase of life cycle is gametophyte. But in pteridophytes, gymnosperms and angiosperms, the dominant phase of life cycle is sporophyte. That is a proper plant with root, leaf and stem. Now, I haven't discussed what is gametophyte in gymnosperm and angiosperm. You must have heard the name of pollen grain. Pollen grain. Yes, in gymnosperms and angiosperms both, male gametophyte is pollen grain. And inside the pollen grain, male gametes are formed. So yes, gametophyte is a body, multicellular body on which gametes are formed. So yes, pollen grain is two-cell structure which ultimately give rise to male gametes. So both in Gymnosperms and Angiosperm, gametophyte is pollen grain. In Gymnosperms, the endosperm is the female gametophyte, which I will be explaining it when I will tackle Gymnosperms specially. And you all must have heard, beta, the word embryo sac. Embryo sac is the female gametophyte of Angiosperms in which egg cell is formed, right? So I hope you can imagine gametophyte of algae. When you close your eyes, you imagine the cloth, green cloth floating into the river. That is gametophyte of algae. The green mat-like cover spread on the soil. That is the gametophyte of bryophyte. Likewise, pteridophyte have a very small thalloid structure present on the soil. That is the gametophyte of pteridophyte. In case of Gymnosperm and Angiosperm, male gametophyte is pollen grain. Female gametophyte in Angiosperm is embryo sac, and in Gymnosperm it is endosperm. So I hope when you close your eyes, you can imagine what is gametophyte and what is sporophyte, and how structure is getting changed from algae to Angiosperms, right? Chaliye. Now let's move to the another part, the another terms, embryophytes. One more thing. Yeah. So now we know what is sporophyte and what is gametophyte. Now tracheophytes. But all those plants which have xylem and phloem in them, they are called as tracheophytes or vascular plants. Pteridophytes, Gymnosperms, Angiosperms are vascular plants because they have xylem and phloem. Algae and bryophytes, they do not have vascular system, so they are non-vascular plants. Now let's go to some other important terms. Embryophytes. In all those plants in which zygote undergoes mitosis to form embryo, those are embryophytes. And bryo, pterido, gymno, angio, all of them are embryophytes. But algae is not an embryophyte, because in algae, zygote undergoes meiosis to form haploid spores. That means in algae, zygotic, this question is very, very common. In which plant zygotic meiosis occurs? You will say algae. In algae, embryo will not be formed. Okay, zygote will give rise to spores. Clear? Spermatophytes, all those plants in which seed is formed. Now the sperma, the word sperma means seed, not the male gamete or sperms. It is seed bearing plants. So in whole plant kingdom, seeds are formed in Gymnosperms and Angiosperms. Then archegoniates, all those plants in which the archegonium or the female sex organ is present, that is archegonium, they are called as archegoniates. Bryo, pterido, gymno, these three plants, they have the multicellular female sex organ, that is archegonium. In Angiosperms, archegonium is not present because they have carpel and pistil in the flower. Okay? So these are some, and yes, in the whole plant kingdom, fruit and flower is formed only in Angiosperm. Fruit and flower only in Angiosperms. That is why Angiosperms are also called as flowering plants. Okay. Now, here you can see sporophyte. This is the unicellular zygote, which is the sporophyte of algae, unicellular sporophyte. This is the sporophyte of funaria, that is the bryophyte. And you can see the sporophyte is dependent on the gametophyte. This is the real picture of funaria, where you can see that this yellow part, that is the sporophyte, is dependent on the gametophyte. Okay? This is the sporophyte of pteridophytes, small-heighted herbaceous plants. This is the sporophyte of Gymnosperms, large-sized tree. And these are the sporophytes of Angiosperms, different height, different sized trees or herbs or shrubs. Okay, and these are the flowering plants. Now we understand the basic concept. Now let's compare all the members of plant kingdom, because this table is really going to help you. We will not cover these points when we will be separately tackling them, because we are covering it here and it would be easier to learn. So let's first compare the habitat. Algae is aquatic. It is mostly found in water. Bryophytes are the first terrestrial plants. They are the first plants to come on land. Pteridophytes are called as the first successful land plants because they have successfully established themselves on the soil habitat. Gymnosperms are all terrestrial. They all are land plants. Angiosperms can be terrestrial or they can be aquatic. You must have heard that some of the angiosperms are hydrophytes like lotus and etc. Now, the dominant phase of life cycle. Which plant has which phase dominant? The dominant phase of life cycle in algae, I've just told you, that is gametophyte. And gametophyte in algae is free living, not dependent on anyone. It is multicellular structure. It is thalloid, not differentiated. And it bear, remember, this point is very important, which I'm highlighting here. The sex organs of algae are unicellular and non-jacketed. One cell is the sex organ of algae, and it is not covered by a protective layer, which we call as a jacket. So it is unicellular, non-jacketed. Remember this, the sex organs. Okay, there is an exception, Cara, which have multicellular jacketed sex organs, which I will be dealing with in the another part. Yeah. Now, the dominant phase of the life cycle of bryophytes is also gametophyte. Again, it is free living, but it bear multicellular jacketed sex organs. Multicellular jacketed sex organs, and the male sex organ is called as antheridium and the female sex organ is called as archegonium. The dominant phase of life cycle of pteridophyte is sporophyte. From pterido to gymno, the dominant phase of life cycle is sporophyte. And I've just told you that in pteridophytes, sporophyte is free living and has proper root, leaf and stem. In case of gymnosperm, you know how is the sporophyte of gymnosperm? Free living, large sized tree. Sporophyte of angiosperm, free living, and they can be herbs, shrubs or trees. Okay. Now let's move further. Now, what is the other phase of life cycle which is not dominant? In algae, it is a sporophyte, which is unicellular. Sporophyte is unicellular, which is represented by zygote, and zygote undergoes meiosis to form haploid spores. And yes, sporophyte is free living in case of algae. But in case of bryophytes, sporophyte is not free living, but is dependent on the gametophyte. Okay. The gametophyte of the pteridophytes, free living, it's free living and it is present on the soil. And the gametophyte of pteridophytes, it also bear multicellular jacketed sex organs, antheridium and archegonium, just like bryophytes. Now, some important thing about the gametophyte of angiosperms and gymnosperms. We've just discussed, beta, that in both angiosperms and gymnosperms, the male gametophyte is pollen grain. Can you imagine a pollen grain? A pollen grain. Up till pteridophytes, gametophyte was a large structure present on soil. It was a large structure present on soil bearing the sex organ. But in gymnosperm and angiosperm, the gametophyte is not present on the soil. It is not green colored and it is highly reduced, some celled structure. Imagine pollen grain. It is highly reduced, some celled structure, not present on the soil, but present on the tree. That means present on the sporophyte. This is the line of NCERT, that in both gymnosperms and angiosperms, gametophyte is highly reduced, some celled structure which is always present or dependent on sporophyte. It does not have any free living existence. These are the lines of NCERT. And the male gametophyte in both the cases, pollen grain. Female gametophyte in gymnosperms is endosperm. And do not confuse this endosperm with the endosperm of angiosperms, which is triploid. No, This endosperm is different. This is the female gametophyte of Gymnosperms. Embryo sac is the female gametophyte of Angiosperms. Okay, clear? Let's move further. Yes, what is homosporous and what is heterosporous? We have just read that on sporophyte, meiosis occurs to form spores. If on the sporophyte only one type of spore will be formed after meiosis, that is homospory. But if on the sporophyte two different types of spores are formed, that is microspore and megaspore, that is heterospory. All the algae are homosporous. This question is very important. All the bryophytes, all are homosporous. Most pteridophytes are homosporous. Few of them are heterosporous. And I'll be telling the important examples later on. And in both gymnosperms and angiosperms, all gymnosperms, all angiosperms are heterosporous. That means they will form two types of spores, that is microspores and megaspores, right? They will form two types of spores, microspores and megaspores. Okay, now I have just told you both algae and bryophytes, they do not have vascular system, so they are atracheophytes or non-vascular plants. Now let's discuss the condition in pterido, gymno and angio. We know that the two important components of xylem are vessels and tracheids, and that of the phloem is sieve tube and companion cells, right? Vessels are only present in angiosperms, absent in gymno and pterido. Gymnosperm has few exceptions which I will be dealing later on, but mostly generally gymno and pteridophyte, they do not have vessels. To have vessels is peculiar of angiosperms. Tracheids are present in all of them for conduction. Sieve tubes, they are absent in gymnosperms and pteridophytes. Instead of sieve tube, gymno and pteridophytes, they have sieve cells. Sieve tube are multicellular tubular structure, but sieve cells are unicellular structure, right? Companion cells, they are absent in both pterido and gymno and present in angiosperms. So angiosperms have all the components, so that is why they're most advanced plants. Clear? So these are some, this is the comparative analysis of the whole plant kingdom. Now I have a basic knowledge of plant kingdom, and now we can tackle the different groups: algae, bryo, pterido, gymno and angio. So let's first start with algae. So let's discuss algae now. Algae. We know many things about algae now, right? Now algae is generally aquatic, found in the water bodies, but it can be epiphytic also. That means it can found over the surface of plants also, like the Oudogonium, green algae found on the surface of grasses. Then epizoic can be found on the surface of animals also, like they can be found on the surface of snails and can be found on the surface of sloth bear. Then some of the algae, they're also found in moist stones, soil and wood. These are the lines of NCERT covered over here. So now you know what is the habitat of algae. Then beta, let's discuss the body organization of the algae. Many algae are unicellular. The unicellular algae are mostly green algae. Like the examples are chlorella, chlamydomonas. They are unicellular green algae. And some of the green algae which are unicellular can be found in the form of colonies. So they are unicellular colonial algae like volvox. And algae are multicellular also, like some of the green algae are multicellular and have filamentous shape like Eulothrix, Spirogyra, Cladophora, Most of the red algae are multicellular, and all of the brown algae are multicellular, and they form massive forms, that is kelps. So now we have an idea that algae can be unicellular or they can be multicellular. Now let's go to the reproduction in algae. Algae can reproduce asexually, vegetatively, and sexually. Vegetative reproduction in algae is seen by fragmentation, where some part of the parent filament separates and give rise to the new filament. Fragmentation is most commonly seen in the filamentous forms like Eulothrix, Spirogyra, Cladophora, right? Then asexual reproduction occurs with the help of asexual spores. And the most important question from this part is, it asks, which is the most common asexual spore formed in algae? That is zoospore. This is very important statement. Most common asexual spore of algae is zoospore, right? Conidia is the most common asexual spore of fungi. Okay, and do not confuse zoospore with zygospore. They are often confused. Zygospore is zygote, resting zygote. Okay, so zoospore, most common asexual, not sexual, asexual spore of algae. Then sexual reproduction. You know what is sexual reproduction? Formation of gametes and then fusion of gametes. But here, the fusion of gamete in algae can be in three forms: isogamous, anisogamous, and oogamous. Isogamous forms. In isogamy, the two gametes are similar to each other. They are just similar. If they are similar, both of them can be non-flagellated or non-motile. And if they are similar, both of them can be motile or flagellated. This makes a very important question. What question comes? It has come in NEET. Spirogyra has, option 1, similar flagellated gametes, dissimilar non-flagellated gametes, similar flagellated or dissimilar non-flagellated. What would be your answer? Spirogyra has similar gametes, but they are non-flagellated or non-motile. Eulothrix, Cladophora, Chlamydomonas, they have similar gametes, but flagellated or motile. So this is isogamy. In anisogamy, the male gamete is smaller and the egg cell is bigger. In comparison, it is bigger. And anisogamy is seen in Eudorhina according to NCERT, and in various other forms also, in some species of Chlamydomonas also. And then comes the oogamy, the most advanced type of fusion, in which the male gamete is very small and the female gamete is very large and have abundant food reserve material, right? Oogamy is generally what? That the male gamete is motile and the female gamete would be non-motile, right? But not always the case. In oogamy, the male and female both can be non-motile. But yes, there is very large difference in the gametes. In Angiosperms and Gymnosperms, there is oogamy, but the male gamete and the egg both are non-motile. In algae, the oogamy is mostly like this, where the male gamete is motile and the female gamete is non-motile, seen in volvox and fucus. Learn these examples along with me because they are important. This all is NCERT. Learn these examples along with me right here and right now. Then comes the anisogamy, this sort of oogamy, where both the gametes are non-motile. In red algae, this kind of oogamy is seen. Okay? Chaliye, so this is reproduction in algae. Hope you understood well. Let's move on. Now, we can divide the algae on the basis of what kind of pigment they have, how the food material gets stored in them, and what is present in their cell wall composition. Based on these things, we can classify algae into three classes: chlorophyceae, green algae; rhodophyceae, red algae; and phaeophyceae, brown algae. Okay, but I have already written these things. I have just written these things on these slides, so the process of revision could be faster. If I write all these things right here and right now, you will also sleep and I will also sleep. Okay, because some students have this problem that do not we don't want ready-made slides, we want teacher to write. So I also love writing, but if I will start writing over here, the process will become very slow and I would not be able to cover this whole chapter, which is big. Okay, so made the process fast. I have already written the slides and I am making you revise it. So you don't have any tension to write or to memorize, because these notes will be provided. You just have to listen carefully, listen the whole thing like you are listening to a novel, and learn with me. Okay, let's move on to the different classes. I have made a comparative table of algae, which will make your work very easy. If you learn this table, no question will be left from all the classes. So first, let's compare the habitat of all three of them. Green algae, see better here. Green algae mostly found in fresh water, and they are very rarely found in the marine water, right? Salty water. Brackish water have lesser concentration of salt, and the seawater has more concentration of salt. Okay. Brown algae, they are mostly marine, mostly just opposite of green algae. Just learn with me. And NCERT says that very, very rare is the case that brown algae can be found in fresh water, very rarely. Likewise, the red algae are mostly marine. They are also mostly marine and they can found in the fresh water. Very few forms are found in the fresh water. So mostly fresh water is green algae. Rest both of them are mostly marine. Learned? Let's go to thallus organization. That means how is their body organized? Green algae can be unicellular or can be multicellular. I have just told you. Chlamydomonas, chlorella, wallworks, hydrodictyon. Many forms of green algae are unicellular and many forms of green algae are multicellular as well. Cladophora, Eulothrix, Spirogyra, Cara, right? So both forms are found in green algae. Brown algae, listen carefully. No brown algae is unicellular. All brown algae are multicellular. And some of the brown algae can grow up to 100 meters also, like Macrocystis. So they are also called as kelps or sea forest, right? Their body is sort of differentiated, not properly differentiated. They have three parts in their gametophyte, that is frond, stipe, and holdfast. Frond is a leaf-like structure which has the function of photosynthesis, not leaf, okay? Stipe is stem-like structure, conduction. Holdfast is root-like. It has the function to attach the algae to the substratum. Red algae, mostly multicellular. Very rarely they can be unicellular. That means brown algae and red algae are multicellular mostly. Unicellular forms are mostly found in green algae. Clear? Learned? Let's move on. Cell wall. Yes. See, what is common in the cell wall of all the types of algae? Cellulose, because they are member of plant kingdom. So cellulose is present everywhere. But apart from cellulose, what extra is present in their cell wall? That is the basis of classification. In green algae, apart from cellulose, they have pectose. This is the line of NCERT, important. The outer layer of cell wall is composed of pectose and the inner layer of cell wall is composed of cellulose. Then let's come to the brown algae. Where brown algae has cellulose, but along with it, it has non-sulfated esters. Non-sulfated, no sulfur. And they are also called as phycocolloids or hydrocolloids or mucocolloids, right? So these substances found in the cell wall, they are non-sulfated esters, and the example is algin. You cannot forget this. This forms very important question. Algin. Algin found in the cell wall of, your answer would be brown algae. What sort of nature it has? It is non-sulfated ester compound called as phycocolloid or hydrocolloid, right? Algin is often used as an emulsifier in cough syrups, in cosmetic products, in toothpaste. Emulsifiers are those substances which make the medium homogeneous, right? Okay. Then red algae along with cellulose. See, they have sulfated esters. They have non-sulfated esters, but they have sulfated esters in their cell wall. They are also called as phycocolloids and hydrocolloids. And two types of sulfated esters are found in the cell wall of red algae: agar-agar, and carrageenan. Very important, beta. Agar-agar, carrageenan. You cannot forget this. Very important. Has come numerous times in NEET. Those red algae from whose cell wall agar-agar are produced commercially, they are called as agarophytes. And the examples is Gelidium and Gracilaria. You cannot confuse it with Gymnodinium and Goniolax. Students often, mix up these two. Gymnodinium, Goniolax, dinoflagellates. Okay, Gracilaria, Gelidium, red algae from whose cell wall agar-agar is formed on commercial basis. Very important, numerous times. Carrageenan is obtained from the cell wall of the red algae Chondrus crispus. It is the one single name. Chondrus is the name of the genus and crispus is the name of the species. Chondrus crispus. Commonly it is also called as Irish moss, but it is not a moss. It's not a bryophyte, it's a false moss. Right? It's not a bryophyte, it's an algae. So it's a misnomer. Okay, and Chondrus crispus gives carrageenan, and carrageenan is also used as emulsifier in pharmaceutical products and cosmetics. Agar-agar, you must have heard agarose gel in gel electrophoresis. So agarose gel is formed from agar-agar. Gem and jellies, they have thick consistency, right? Because of agar-agar. And agar-agar is used in culture mediums also in tissue culture. Okay, so this is about the cell wall. I hope you understand the cell wall and you have learnt along with me, right? The names. Let's move on. Yeah, now red algae is photosynthetic in nature. So what are the photosynthetic pigments? Chlorophyll A is universal, present in all the type of algae. So one thing you don't have to cram is chlorophyll A is present in all of them. In green algae, chlorophyll B is present. And now I'm saying one thing, listen carefully. Having chlorophyll B is higher plant-like character, right? Where you found the chlorophyll B first in euglenoids. And having a chlorophyll B is higher plant-like characters. So question comes, which type of algae show higher plant-like character? Green algae, because it has chlorophyll B. Then brown algae, along with chlorophyll A, it has chlorophyll C. Red algae, chlorophyll A and chlorophyll D. Red, D. So D. Okay. Now accessory pigments. Along with the main photosynthetic pigments, some helpers are also present. Those are called as accessory photosynthetic pigments, and they are xanthophylls and carotenoids in green algae. Again, that means carotenoids and xanthophylls are present in all kind of algae and correctly in all plants. Okay, so they also have carotenoids and xanthophylls, but brown algae has a special type of xanthophyll, fucoxanthin, which is brown in color, and that is why brown algae are brown. So what is the reason of brown algae being brown? Presence of a special xanthophyll, that is fucoxanthin. Then in red algae, they also have carotenoids and xanthophylls, but along with it, they have special proteins in them called as phycobilin proteins. In the whole, on the earth, in all the living organisms, phycobilin proteins are found only in two places: cyanobacteria, that is blue-green algae, and red algae. Except these two, phycobilin proteins are found nowhere. Okay, so phycobilin proteins are of two types: R-phycocyanin. R stands for red algae. R-phycocyanin and R-phycoerythrin. Phycocyanin is blue colored and phycoerythrin is red colored, and the amount of phycoerythrin is more in case of red algae, which gives red algae the red color, right? So red algae is red because of phycoerythrin, and That is a type of phycobilin protein. This forms an important question. Okay, and what they share common with blue-green algae? Cyanobacteria, presence of phycobilin proteins. Okay, one more thing about red algae, that red algae are benthic because of this thing. Red algae can survive in benthic conditions. What are benthic conditions? Sea bottom. Practically no photosynthetic organism can survive at the sea bottom because light doesn't reach over there, but red algae can. Why? Because of the presence of phycoerythrin. This pigment is so efficient in absorbing the light that it can absorb the red colored light, even the blue colored light, sorry, even at those depths. So this question can come: how red algae can survive at the sea bottom or in the benthic habitat? You will say because of presence of phycoerythrin. Okay, chaliye. Now the reserved food material. In which form the food is stored? In green algae, the food is stored in the form of pyrenoids. What are pyrenoids? They are protein molecules surrounded by starch. Protein surrounded by starch. So in green algae, pyrenoids are the form of reserved food material. Then in brown algae, reserved food material can be laminarin, which is a type of carbohydrate or polysaccharide, or mannitol, which is a type of alcohol, right? Learn with me, laminarin, mannitol, right? When you listen something carefully with focus and you enjoy that also, automatically you memorize that. But when you effortfully try to learn something, you cannot, because up till and until the brain enjoys a thing, it will not memorize anything. You do not write a song on a copy and cram the lyrics. Automatically you learn a song. When you listen a song 2 or 3 times, you automatically learn it because your brain enjoys it, right? So do not effortfully learn or cram anything. Just enjoy it, just focus, and it would be automatically learned. And moreover, the beauty of NEET is that it has 4 options. So if you have heard about it, if you have somewhere read about it carefully, you can your brain will memorize it from the 4 options and you'll get the answer. The beauty of the NEET is that you don't have to cram things, you have to remember them nicely. Now the reserved food material in red algae is Floridian starch. Floridian starch, and this is the line of NCERT which is pretty important. The structure of Floridian starch is almost similar to amylopectin and glycogen. Glycogen is found in us as reserved food material. Okay, so remember with me, learn with me. In green algae, pyrenoids. In brown algae, laminarin, mannitol. And in red algae, Floridian starch. Okay, let's move further. Oh my god, such an important point. Flagellation. See flagella, where a flagella can be found in algae. If the algae is unicellular, the flagella can be found on its main body. If the, listen carefully what I'm saying, what I'm trying to say. If the algae is unicellular like Chlamydomonas, then it can have the flagella on the main body, or it can have the flagella on the gametes, I've just shown you in case of Chlamydomonas, or it can have the flagella on zoospores, the asexual spores. So in the whole life cycle, where the algae can have a flagella on the main body if it is unicellular, on the gametes, and on the zoospores, the asexual spores. Okay, and yes, one more thing I will add here. This also makes an important question. Yes, Chlamydomonas is a unicellular motile algae. Its main body has, this is the main body, has flagella, but the chlorella is unicellular green algae, which is non-motile. The main body does not have the flagella. Okay, let's move further. Yes, what I was saying. Okay, so in green algae, wherever the flagella is present, it can range up to 2 to 8. That means the green algae or the zoospores of green algae, they can have flagella 2, 4, 8, 6, right? The range can be 2 to 8. The position of flagella will always be apical. Apical means at the apex. And isocont condition, all the flagella would be similar to each other in size and structure, and all the flagella would be smooth. If flagella has these hair-like projections on the surface, then the flagella is rough, and if it does not have the hair-like projections, it is smooth. Okay, so the flagella of green algae is always smooth, okay? So what you have to remember regarding the flagellation in green algae, the number, learned with me, the number can be 2 to 8. Position will always be apical. All of them will be similar to each other, that is isocont, and the flagella will always be smooth. This question often comes. In green algae, the flagella are similar or dissimilar? Similar. Smooth or rough? Smooth. Position apical. Okay. In brown algae is always multicellular. That means the flagella cannot be present on the main body. The flagella is mainly present on zoospores, right? In brown algae also, mostly oogamous form is there. So the flagella is present either on the male gamete or on the zoospores. But NCERT has discussed the flagellation on the zoospore of brown algae, right? Now see, the flagella are 2 in number, fixed 2 in number, that is biflagellated condition. Position lateral, sidewise, and this habit of having flagella laterally is called as pyriform habit or pear-shaped habit. This question is pretty important. Which algae has pyriform zoospores or pear-shaped zoospores? Your answer will be brown algae. And what is the meaning of pyriform zoospores? Having flagella laterally. Okay, this is the line of NCERT and very important. Pyriform pear-shaped zoospores. Pyriform pear-shaped zoospores are found in brown algae, and they will always be biflagellated, 2 flagella, and they are heterocont. The 2 flagella are dissimilar to each other, and one flagella is smooth and the other flagella is rough. So you can see the difference between the flagellation in green algae and brown algae. Here the position was apical, here the position is lateral, called as pyriform habit. Here they can be 2 to 8, but here the number is always 2, biflagellated. Similar, dissimilar, always smooth. They are, the smaller one is smooth and the larger one is rough. Okay, and no tension. In red algae, the flagella is completely absent from the whole life cycle. On the main body, can't be present, multicellular, right? On the gametes, no. Even the, remember what I've just told you, even the male gametes were non-motile. Red algae have this kind of oogamy. Remember, red algae have this kind of oogamy. The male gamete as well as the female gamete, they do not have what? Flagella. So remember, the red algae will always have non-motile gametes. This point is important, beta. Red algae will always have non-motile gametes. Both the gametes are non-motile because flagella is completely absent from the life cycle. And even the zoospores of algae are non-motile. Yani, that means the flagella of the, yes, what I was saying, yes, that on the red algae, the flagella will be absent on gametes, zoospores, as well as the main body. That means their asexual spores will always be even the asexual spores are always non-motile. Are also non-motile. The gametes are also non-motile. Okay, Yes. Now examples. I have covered so many examples of green algae like Chlamydomonas, Chlorella, Volvox, Udogonium. These are several examples of green algae. Chlorella. There is one important point regarding Chlorella, that Chlorella is it's very rich in protein. It is a high source of protein. That is why it is used as single cell protein. Why single? Because it is unicellular, right? So this question often comes, which unicellular green algae used as single cell protein? Example is Chlorella. And please do not confuse it with spirulina. Spirulina is also used as single cell protein, but it is a blue-green algae. In old NCRTs, under green algae, it was written that spirulina is a green alga used as single cell protein. But this point has been deleted, and in the new versions of NCRT, in the new editions of NCRT is written that spirulina is not a green algae, it is a blue-green algae, it's a bacteria. Chlorella is a unicellular green algae which is used as single cell protein. Okay. Cara is exception. It's a multicellular green algae, but sort of advanced from other algae because it has multicellular jacketed sex organs. The sex organs of rest of the algae are unicellular and non-jacketed. So it is pretty advanced as compared to the other algae. Okay. Yes. Now some other examples of brown algae. The examples of brown algae: Laminaria, which is a rich source of iodine. Then Sargassum. Because of Sargassum, there is a sea called as Sargasso Sea, right? Macrocystis, this can grow up to hundreds of meters. It's a giant form. Dictyota ectocarpus fucus, brown algae. Okay. Red algae, I have just told you many examples of red algae: Gracilaria, Gelidium, Chondrus crispus, Porphyra. Porphyra is a rich source of carbohydrate. It is used as emanuri bread in Japan. Polysiphonia. Polysiphonia is also a red algae. It is a rich source of bromine. Okay. Yes. So if you learn this table, this whole comparative table very carefully, your algae is done. Nothing will come out of this in NEET. I guarantee you this thing. Now there are some extra points which are not covered in the table. Some extra points are which are given in NCRT, that there are approximately 70 species of marine algae which are edible, which can be eaten. How many species? There are 70 species of not freshwater algae, marine algae. 70 species of marine algae which are edible. Examples are Laminaria, Sargassum, Porphyra. Laminaria, these are given in NCRT. Laminaria, brown algae. Sargassum, again brown algae. And Porphyra. Okay, red algae. Yes. All of them, all the kind of algae, they would be having chloroplast because they all sorry, because they all are eukaryotic and photosynthetic. But what is special about the chloroplast of green algae? That they can be of various shapes. In Spirogyra, the chloroplast is spiral shaped, right? In Eulothrix, it can be girdle shaped. In Chlamydomonas, it is cup shaped. So the shape of the chloroplast of green algae can be of various shapes. Okay. Then what is special about red algae? Yes. See what I've just told you, that in algae, zygote forms, and just after the formation of zygote, meiosis occurs and haploid spores are formed, right? Haploid spores are formed. That means after fertilization, there are no complex changes in the algae, right? In us, from zygote, embryo is formed. Formation of embryo from zygote is post-fertilization development, which is complex in nature. But in algae, zygote does not undergo mitosis to form embryo. It undergoes meiosis to form spores. That means the post-fertilization complex development is absent in algae, right? But in some red algae, this post-fertilization complex is this post-fertilization development is seen. Okay, I'm a bit tired. Okay, doesn't matter. Chaliye. So you remember this thing, whole thing, algae, fit in mind? No problem? Okay. So now without delaying, let's start with bryophytes. See this. So now we have seen what algae is. Now let's move on to bryophytes. Yeah, beta. We know many things about bryophytes now. That bryophytes are the first land plants, first terrestrial plants. The dominant phase of life cycle is gametophyte, and they all are homosporous. We have just learned it in the table. Now let's know something more about bryophytes. Obviously, they are found in moist and shady areas. They are called as the amphibians of plant kingdom. Why they are called as amphibians of plant kingdom? Because they reside on land, but they need water for fertilization. So they are amphibians of plant kingdom. Now, let's talk about the dominant phase of life cycle of bryophytes, that is gametophyte. We divide bryophytes into two categories, liverworts and the mosses, that is leafy bryophytes. Liverworts are primitive ones and the mosses are the advanced ones. Okay, now what is the difference between their gametophyte? Let's understand. The liverworts, also called as the thalloid forms, their gametophyte is dorsiventrally appressed. Dorsiventrally appressed. What does it mean? That it is flattened on the ground. It is present parallel to the ground, horizontal to the ground. This habit is dorsiventrally appressed. And obviously, their gametophyte do not have roots, but have root-like structures called as rhizoids to attach to the substratum. And remember, beta, that the rhizoids are unicellular in nature. Okay? While the advanced bryophytes, their gametophyte is not parallel to the ground, but it is perpendicular to the ground. That means they have slender upright axis. Upright means perpendicular axis on which leaves are arranged spirally. Sorry, I have some soreness in my throat right now. What I was saying, yes, leaves are arranged spirally, right? Understand one thing, beta. In the NCERT, this line is written, but the word leaf is generally used for sporophyte, not for gametophyte. But if NCERT has written it, so okay, I'm telling you. But gametophyte do not have leaves. Sporophyte generally have leaves. Okay? But NCERT has written it. Okay? This is not leaf. This is leaf-like structure. But NCERT has written it like that way, that the gametophyte of the bryophytes has perpendicular upright axis on which leaf-like structures or leaf are arranged spirally. And this is not root, they are rhizoids. But the rhizoids here are multicellular in nature. Clear, beta? So, the gametophyte of liverworts is parallel to the ground, dorsiventrally appressed, but the gametophyte of the mosses is vertically present, perpendicular to the ground. Here, the rhizoids are multicellular, but here the rhizoids are unicellular. This is important. Remember this. Okay. Now, very important example of liverworts or thalloid forms is Markentia. And three important examples given in NCERT of mosses or the leafy bryophytes are, learn with me, Funaria, Sphagnum and Polytrichum. I have told you, do not effortfully try to learn the names. Just enjoy the names and you will learn them. So, Funaria, Sphagnum and Polytrichum. Clear? So, up till here, we have learned many things about bryophyte. Now, I hope you understand what is the gametophyte of bryophyte and how does it look in liverworts and in mosses. Let's move forward now. Now, let's talk about the sporophyte of the bryophytes. I have just told you that sporophyte of bryophytes is not independent but present on the gametophyte. That means it is dependent on the gametophyte. And a sporophyte has three parts in it. A sporophyte, if I draw a diagram to give you the basic idea. So beta, this is the gametophyte and the sporophyte is present on the gametophyte, right? This is the gametophyte and this is the sporophyte. And the sporophyte is present on the gametophyte and it has three parts. This part, which is embedded into the gametophyte, is foot. This part is seta and this part is capsule. So a sporophyte has three parts, right? The most important part of a sporophyte is capsule, because inside this capsule meiosis occurs and haploid spores are formed. We know na that on sporophyte spores are formed by meiosis. So on sporophyte in the capsule spores are formed by meiosis. Then they are dispersed and bryophytes have a very elaborate mechanism of spore dispersal. In every bryophyte, how spores will be dispersed is different, right? Then these spores will land on the soil, they will germinate and give rise to gametophyte. So this is how their life cycle works. On the gametophyte, they have sex organs, right? They will form gamete, then zygote will be formed, then embryo will be formed. That embryo will form sporophyte on the gametophyte. This sporophyte will undergo meiosis to form spores. The spores will come on land, will germinate to give rise to gametophyte again. Okay, so I hope you understand the gamete. You can imagine the gametophyte of bryophytes and you can imagine the sporophyte of bryophytes. Clear? Now the sporophyte of mosses, is more developed as compared to the sporophyte of liverworts. That means something will be absent from the sporophyte of liverworts, but the mosses will have all the three parts in their sporophyte, that is foot, seta and capsule. So remember this line, this is the line of NCERT, that sporophyte of mosses is more developed than the liverworts. Okay, let's move further. Now let's discuss reproduction in bryophytes. Bryophytes, and one more thing beta, asexual spore formation is restricted to lower organism. Asexual spores, it is found in the members of Protista, it is found in algae, but asexual spores are not formed when we move towards higher plants. So in bryophytes also, asexual spores will not be formed. Remember this thing, okay? So vegetative reproduction or asexual reproduction occurs by fragmentation in protonema. This word protonema is very important according to NEET point of view. I'll just discuss it. What is protonema? Let's discuss gemi. Liverworts like Marchantia, on the gametophyte of Marchantia, they have special cup-like structures and these are called as gemma cup. In these gemma cup, some special bodies are formed called as gemi. And remember, you will not say that gemi are asexual spores. No, this is wrong. They are asexual buds, because asexual spore will not be formed in Bryo, Pterido, Gymno and Angio. Okay, these are multicellular. One single gemma is a multicellular structure. It is not unicellular structure, and they are green colored because every gemma has chloroplast in it, and when this gemma germinates on the soil, it gives rise to new gametophyte of Marchantia. So this is how gemi helps in asexual reproduction. Clear? What you have to remember about gemi? It is not asexual spore, it is asexual bud. It is not unicellular, it is multicellular, and it is green colored. Okay. Now let's discuss protonema. Oh, sorry. Yeah, the word protonema beta. is used only and only for mosses. Remember this thing. I'm repeating it again. The word protonema is used only for mosses like Funaria, sphagnum, polytrichum. Okay, remember this. If there is a match the column, and protonema is written in front of Markantia, that would be a wrong match. Okay, protonema word is not used for liverworts. It is only used for mosses. So what happens in mosses like Funaria, sphagnum and polytrichum? The spore comes from the sporophyte, lands on the soil, germinate. What we already know, that when a spore germinate, it give rise to gametophyte, right? We know it. Spore germinate and directly give rise to gametophyte. But the things in mosses are a bit complicated. This spore germinates, but not to give the real gametophyte, but it gives an intermediary stage, and that is called as protonema. Okay, remember this thing. Spore germinate not to give directly the real gametophyte, but it gives primary protonema, and this is called as the juvenile phase. The juvenile phase, it is not the real gametophyte. It does not bear sex organs, and this is thalloid, that means parallel to the ground. Then this primary protonema undergoes lateral branching and gets spread over the soil surface, right? It gets lateral branching and spread over the soil surface, and then it is called as secondary protonema. In this secondary protonema, budding and fragmentation occurs. You know, these are asexual means of reproduction. Secondary protonema undergo asexual reproduction to finally form the real gametophyte of the mosses. And you know, what is the nature of the real gametophyte of mosses? It is slender, upright, right? Leaves are arranged spirally, multicellular rhizoids. This is the real gametophyte of mosses, which is called as the leafy stage, the adult stage, which bear the sex organs. I hope you remember. So, the intermediary stage protonema is only used for mosses, not for liverworts. Spore directly gives protonema, then undergo the asexual reproduction and then form ultimately the real gametophyte, the leafy stage. Okay? Let's move on to sexual reproduction in bryophytes. All the bryophytes show oogamy. That means the male gamete will be motile and the female gamete will be non-motile. And all the bryophytes show internal fertilization. Algae mostly show external fertilization. Some of the algae like red algae, brown algae, they show internal fertilization also. But up from bryophyte up to angiosperms, all these plants show internal fertilization from bryo up to angio. Okay? So to understand sexual reproduction in bryophytes, let's go to the gametophyte of bryophytes. Okay? And we know that on the gametophyte, the sex organs are present. So this is the gametophyte. The male sex organ and the female sex organ are present on the gametophyte. Here I have shown that Antheridium and Archegonium are present on the same gametophyte. Yes, because most of the bryophytes are homothelic. That means most of the bryophytes have both the sex organs on the same gametophyte. There is an exception, Markantia. I'll be telling it later on, okay? So, we know, I have just told you in the table, that the sex organs of the bryophytes are multicellular and protected by sterile jacket layer. Male sex organ is Antheridium, female sex organ is Archegonium. So what happens during reproduction? This Antheridium forms the antherozoids. And the another name of antherozoids is male gametes. And the male gametes in the Antheridium will not be formed by meiosis, but obviously by mitosis, because this gametophyte is already haploid And if you have to make a haploid cell on a haploid body, then obviously you will do it by mitosis. So inside the antheridium, the male gametes, the another name of male gametes is enterozoids. Do not forget this. Okay, so formed. And these male gametes are biflagellated. That means they are motile. They have two flagella. So with the help of water, they move towards the neck of archegonium. Okay, and this archegonium attracts the male gamete towards itself by secreting some chemical substances. This kind of movement is called as chemotactic movement. That means these enterozoids, with the help of water, gets attracted towards the archegonium. This kind of movement is chemotactic movement. Ultimately, the biflagellated male gametes reaches the archegonium. Inside the archegonium, fertilization happens. Internal fertilization. And what is formed? Zygote. And zygote will undergo mitosis. You know, zygote will undergo mitosis to form embryo. And embryo will form sporophyte. And that sporophyte will always be present on the gametophyte. This is sexual reproduction. And embryo was not forming in algae. So in the plant kingdom, the embryo is first formed in bryophytes. That is why they are called as first embryophytes. Okay, so I hope you understand the sexual reproduction here properly. No problem? Let's move further now. There are some extra important points regarding bryophytes. That bryophytes have elaborate mechanism for spore dispersal. I have just told you that when the sporophyte gets mature, it gets ruptured, and how the spore disperse is very different in every species of bryophytes. So they have a wide range, they have a variety that how spores will be dispersed. Okay, and yes, bryophytes play a very important role in ecological succession. You must have read this in your 12th class. What is ecological succession? When there is a area which is barren, the first species to come over there are lichens. After lichens, mosses comes, the bryophytes comes, and they form a dense mat cover on the whole soil. They bind the soil, add moisture to the soil, and makes the environment very good for further plants like pterido, gymno, angio. And that area that area takes thousands or millions of years to form a forest. Ecological succession. So bryophytes play a very, very important role in ecological succession. They act as soil binders and add moisture to the soil. So the economic, commercial importance of bryophytes is not much, right? But their ecological importance is so much. They play a very important role in ecology, in nature. Let's read the lines of NCERT, which are very important. Yeah. See, beta, some important lines of NCERT which can directly come in NEET. True or false? See what is written over here. Some cells of the sporophyte undergo reduction division to produce haploid spores. Yes, we know. Which part of sporophyte undergo meiosis? Capsule. Inside the capsule, some cells undergo reduction division, meiosis, to form spores. And these spores germinate to produce gametophyte. Yes, we know that, right? Okay. And one more thing important, beta, that in the case of bryophytes, zygote do not undergo reduction division immediately. This line is very important. Remember, in algae, zygote used to go reduction division, that is meiosis, immediately to form spores. But in bryophytes, zygote does not undergo meiosis or reduction division, but it undergoes mitosis or equational division to form embryo. So this line is very important. In case of bryophytes, zygote do not undergo reduction division immediately. Yes, because zygote forms a multicellular body called sporophyte. You just know what happens. zygote undergoes equational division or mitosis to form embryo, then that embryo forms a sporophyte, and ultimately inside the sporophyte, in the capsule, some cells undergo meiosis to form haploid spores. I hope these lines of NCERT are very clear to you. That is why they are first embryophytes, because zygote does not undergo reductional division immediately. Okay? Yes. Now these lines are also important. Let's see what are they. Bryophytes in general are of little economic importance. Economic importance is very little, but ecological importance is very high. But there are some bryophytes, there are some mosses which provide food for herbaceous mammals, birds, and other animals. There are bryophytes which act as food for herbaceous mammals, birds, and other animals. Now, sphagnum, a very important moss, what sphagnum does, beta? Sphagnum can store approximately 20 times water of its own weight. Imagine, that means it can hold so much of water inside it. So whenever, suppose in a very high profile marriage, some very, expensive flowers are used for decoration like tulips and, zinnias. So when they are taken to the marriage site, they can, they can wilt, but the flowers are packed in sphagnum. The flowers are packed in sphagnum and then they are transshipped to the marriage site. That means the sphagnum has so much of water in it that it will not allow the flowers to die or to wilt. Clear? That is why sphagnum is used as a packaging material for transshipment of living materials like flowers. If you have to transfer some living material like flower from here to there, you can pack it in sphagnum, because sphagnum will not allow them to die, because it can provide moisture to it for a longer period of time. Clear? So this line is very important. And moreover, there is one important use of sphagnum, that it is used as a fuel also. Sphagnum, when it gets dried up, it can used as a very good fuel like coal, and that is why sphagnum is also called as peat moss. Sphagnum is also called as peat moss or cotton moss. Okay, or bog moss. There are several names of sphagnum. So why peat moss? Because it is used as a fuel. Why cotton moss? In World War I, sphagnum was used as a substitute of cotton, because it also has the antiseptic properties like Dettol. So when the injured soldiers came, the doctors just used to put the sphagnum on the wounds. So it used to act as cotton as well as Dettol. So it is also called as the cotton moss. Okay, so that means sphagnum has a very important economic importance. Clear? It is used as a packaging material and can be used as a fuel. That is why it is called as the peat moss. Clear? Now what is written here? Mosses along with lichens are the first organism to colonize rocks and hence are of great ecological importance. What I have just told you is the economic importance. But how they are important ecologically? Because they play very important role in ecological succession along with lichens. And what they do, they decompose rocks, making the substrate suitable for the growth of plant. They decompose rocks, they secrete enzymes, decompose rock, help in the formation of soil, bind the soil and add moisture to the soil. So they are of great ecological importance. Clear? So these lines are important. You can read your NCERTs. I've just told you in the beginning of the lecture that grab your NCERTs and underline important points along with me, so that at the time of NEET you can revise those important lines fast. Okay? Yes. So these are some diagrams given in NCERT. You can open the page where these diagrams are given and write along with me. This, the first diagram, is of Markantia. You can see here, this is Markantia, right? Now, what is special? I have just told you in the previous slide that most of the bryophytes are homothelic. That means the archegonium and entheridium are present on the same thallus, but in Markantia, they are present on the different thallus. That means Markantia is heterothelic. Heterothelic. Hetero means two different. Thelic means thallus. It has two different gametophytes, male gametophyte and female gametophyte. This is important regarding Markantia, different from other bryophytes. So here you can see, here in the diagram, you can see, beta, this is the female gametophyte. This is here, you can write in your NCRTs along with me. This is the female gametophyte or female thallus. Okay, and one more special point about Markantia, that the sex organs are not embedded into the gametophyte, but the sex organs are present on a stalk-like structure. A stalk, at the top of the stalk, the sex organ is present. Otherwise, they are generally embedded in the thallus. So, this is special point, that sex organs are present on stalk-like structures. Sex organs are present on stalk-like structures, and those stalks are called as gametophores. In case of the female gametophyte, in case of the female thallus, the gametophore is called as the archegoniophore. The archegoniophore. And in case of the male thallus, this gametophore is called as entheridiophore. Clear? Okay, so sex organs are present on stalk called as gametophore. In female, specifically, the gametophore is archegoniophore, and in male it is entheridiophore. So this is archegoniophore. You can see in your NCRTs, this is archegoniophore, the stalk, and at the top of the stalk, the sex organ archegonium is present. Likewise here, the stalk is entheridiophore, and at the top of the entheridiophore, the sex organ entheridium is present. So these are some special points for Markantia. And you know one more special point about Markantia, that the thallus, that gametophyte, has gemma cup inside which gemmae are formed. This diagram is of Funaria, a moss. Here you can see that in this diagram, gametophyte is given, right? What parts are labeled in gametophyte? Rhizoids and the main axis. And you can see the main axis is perpendicular, upright, on which leaves are arranged spirally. You know that is the gametophyte of mosses. The sporophyte is present on the gametophyte. And what parts are labeled here? Capsule, seta. Foot is not given in the diagram. This part is the sporophyte. Foot is not given in the diagram, so you will not think that foot is absent in Funaria. No, mosses have all the parts of sporophyte. It is not labeled. The foot must be somewhere here, which is embedded into the gametophyte. Foot, seta, capsule. So this is such a beautiful diagram where sporophyte is shown dependent on the gametophyte. Okay, and gametophyte does not have roots, it has rhizoids. And the rhizoids of mosses are multicellular, but the rhizoids of Markantia is unicellular. You remember, no? And here the rhizoids are multicellular. Okay, beta? Chaliye. This is the diagram of sphagnum. Sphagnum. This is the gametophyte of the sphagnum you are seeing here. This is the They have just shown the gametophyte of sphagnum in this diagram. The sporophyte is not shown here. This is the archegonian branch and this is the entheridial branch. That means entheridium and archegonium are present on the same gametophyte. I just told you most of the bryophytes are homothelic. They have both the sex organs on the same gametophyte. Okay, so this is the gametophyte of sphagnum, which is used as a transcript packaging material. Okay, so look at these diagrams. These are pretty important. And remember the special points about Markantia. So with this, bryophytes are finished. I hope you are clear with bryophytes, right? Gametophyte of liverworts is parallel to the ground. Gametophyte of moss is perpendicular to the ground, slender axis. In mosses, spore forms protonema and then protonema forms the leafy stage. Okay? Gemmi are found in Markantia, multicellular green colored structures. Clear? The word protonema used only for mosses. Sporophyte has 3 parts: foot, seta, capsule. Zygote do not undergo meiosis immediately but forms embryo, then sporophyte, and then inside that sporophyte meiosis occurs to form spores. Okay? Markantia is heterothelic. Sex organs are present on stalk. So these are some important points regarding bryophytes. Let's move on further to the another special members, the pteridophytes. What is special about pteridophytes? You know that they are first vascular plants. Xylem and phloem is absent in algae and bryophytes. So it first came in pteridophytes. So they are first vascular plants. The bryophytes were the amphibians of plant kingdom, but pteridophytes are vascular amphibians of the plant kingdom. See, if just it is amphibians of plant kingdom, bryophytes. Vascular amphibians of plant kingdom, pteridophytes. Why? Because they are vascular plants, and they are also amphibians because they are present on the soil, but they need water for fertilization. Both pteridophytes and bryophytes need water for fertilization. Okay? Let's move on further. What is the importance of pteridophytes? Pteridophytes are not of much very importance of, economic importance and ecological importance. Both are not much, but they are used as ornamentals. You must have seen some offices where some ferns are put, right? Those ferns look beautiful. So they are grown as ornamentals, and in the forest, how do they help? They act as soil binders. They prevent soil erosion. So this is the importance of pteridophytes. Now, the habitat which is discussed in NCERT, they are terrestrial, they are found on soil, but they are mostly found in shady areas, and in cool areas, not hot areas. Remember, they are not found in warmer areas. They are found in cool areas, on hill stations, on mountains, right? And pteridophytes are not found just if you have, stepped out of your home and you can see pteridophyte. No, pteridophytes are very rare to find. Okay, so they found in cool areas and the damp areas where the moisture should be high because they need water for fertilization, and they can even grow in sandy soil conditions. These all are the important requirements for their growth: shady area, cool area, damp, moist area, and they can even grow in sandy soil conditions. Okay, now I have just told you they are terrestrial, they are found on land, but some pteridophytes are aquatic also. Some pteridophytes are found in water also, and the examples are important. The most important example, which is, sort of favorite of NEET, is Azolla. Azolla is a fern, aquatic fern, pteridophyte, which is found in water. And what is important about Azolla, that it is a very good biofertilizer. Why? Because inside Azolla, there is a special type of blue-green algae cyanobacteria found, Anabina. And you know that Anabina, cyanobacteria, they are nitrogen fixers. They can fix atmospheric nitrogen to form ammonia. That means inside Azolla, Anabina is there. Anabina can form ammonia, and where Azolla is present, ammonia will be added to the soil. Clear? So Azolla is a very good biofertilizer because it has Anabina in it. Clear? Then Marsilia, Salvinia, These all are the example of aquatic pteridophytes. Okay, Azolla, Marsilia, Salvinia. Clear? Now, in the comparative table, I told you, beta, that most of the pteridophytes are homosporous. They can form only one type of spore, but few pteridophytes are heterosporous also. They form two kind of spores, and the examples are very important. You cannot forget this: Selaginella, Salvinia, Marsilia. These two examples are given in NCERT, so very important. These two pteridophytes are heterosporous, otherwise most of the pteridophytes are homosporous. Clear, beta? Have you learnt it? Selaginella, Salvinia. Let's move on further. Yes, now let's come to the sporophyte of pteridophytes. You know that algae and bryophytes, they have gametophyte as the dominant phase of life cycle. But from pterido to angio, the dominant phase of life cycle is a sporophyte. So let's discuss the sporophyte of pteridophytes. You know that the sporophyte of pteridophyte is a small plant having proper root, leaf and stem. So the sporophyte have root, and the nature of the root is adventitious. They have stem and leaf. Now what is written in NCERT? That the leaves which are present on the sporophyte, they can be small sized or they can be large sized. If the leaves are small sized, they are called as microphyls. Micro means small, phyll means leaf. Microphyll found in Selaginella. This is written in NCERT, so you have to learn this, okay? But in the ferns, what are the example of ferns? I'll just tell you. Bryopteris, Pteris, Adiantum, right? The ferns are the advanced pteridophytes. In the ferns, the leaf are big sized and they are called as macrophylls, found in ferns. You will remember small leaves, microphylls, Selaginella. Large leaves, macrophylls, ferns. Okay? Now, let's understand a very important word, that is sporophyll. Do not get confused between the normal leaves and the sporophylls. Just listen carefully, beta. Phyll means, what is the meaning of phyll? Leaf. Sporo means sporangium. Sporangium. There is a special structure present on the dorsal surface of leaf, right? On the, the dorsal surface of the leaf. This is leaf, the dorsal surface. The dorsal surface of leaf have some special structure, that is sporangium. So those special leaves which have special structures, sporangium behind their surface, they are called as sporophylls. Clear? So sporangium bearing leaf, those leaves which have sporangium on their dorsal surface, you can see here. Just turn the leaf like this and you will be able to see these sporangia. This kind of leaf having sporangia on it is a special leaf called as sporophyll. Clear? Now let's see the diagram. You'll understand it more clearly. This is a sporophyll. You have turned the leaf of sporangia and you're seeing here, see, so beautifully developed sporangia. You can see these brown colored structures here on the dorsal surface. These are the sporangia, and this is a leaf, that is a sporophyll. Okay? So sporophyll bearing sporangia. Now, another important term, very important term from the point of view of NEET, and that is sorus. Very important point, beta. Sorus is a group of sporangia. Now listen carefully, listen carefully. On a plant, sporophyll is present. Clear? When you turn the surface of that leaf, the sporangium can be present separately, or the sporangia can form a group behind the surface of leaf. If the sporangium forms the group, that group of sporangium behind the surface of leaf is called as sorus, right? So the sporangia behind the leaf, they can be present separately or they can form group. The group is sorus. The question has come in NEET. Where is sorus present and where is sorus absent? So just learn this with me. You have to learn the one line only. You have to learn one line only. Sorus is present in ferns. Sorus is present in ferns. Learn with me. Sorus is present in ferns. What is sorus? Group of sporangia. In other pteridophytes like Selaginella and Equisetum, these are not ferns. These are pteridophytes, but they are not ferns. Okay? Selaginella and Equisetum, they do not have sorus. The sporangia are present separately, but ferns have sorus. Clear? Now, let's discuss another important term, strobilus. Strobilus. Listen carefully. These are sporophylls. Special leaves bearing sporangia, sporophylls. These kind of leaves can be present separately on the plant, or these kind of leaves can come together to form a group. All the leaves which have sporangia, they can come together. They are saying we all are same. Let's form a group, no? So they will form a group, right? And this group of, not sporangia, the group of sporophyll, the group of sporophyll is called as strobilus. So those leaves which have sporangia, they aggregate together to form a compact structure, and that compact structure is called as strobilus. This question has come in NEET 2019. Strobilus is absent in ferns. Remember, where there is a sorus, there will be no strobilus, and where there will be strobilus, there will be no sorus. So I have just told you, just learn one line with me. Ferns have sorus. What was sorus? Sorus was group of sporangia. What is strobilus? Group of sporophylls. Ferns have sorus, so they do not have strobilus. And Equisetum, Selaginella, they have strobilus, so they will not have sorus. Right? So do not learn all the line, you'll be confused. Just learn one single line. Ferns have sorus. That means, understood, ferns will not have strobilus. That means strobilus will be present in Equisetum. Clear? Words are clear? Okay. Now you can see the beautiful diagram of strobilus here. All the leaves which had the sporangia, they have come together to form an aggregate structure, and that is a strobilus. And this is the diagram of Equisetum you are seeing here. Very important diagram. You can see beta what is special about Equisetum, that it has strobilus. You can see here at the top of the tip they have strobilus. Now what is special about Equisetum that is different from the other pteridophytes, that they have distinct nodes and internodes. Distinct. Node means you know what are nodes, right? In Angiosperms, nodes are present from which leaf arises. So Equisetum has, you can see in the diagram, they have distinct node and internodes, and some part of stem goes into the soil which is called as rhizome, underground stem. So these three lines are very important regarding Equisetum. You have to remember this. This can come in NEET. Three special point. First, Equisetum has strobilus. That means it does not have sorus. Second, it has distinct nodes and internodes. Third, it has underground stem called as rhizome. And Equisetum, you can see here, it has a horsetail-like structure. That is why Equisetum is also called as horsetail. Okay? So let's move on further. Now let's discuss the gametophyte of pteridophytes, which is not the dominant phase. because sporophyte is the dominant phase. The word we use for the gametophyte of pteridophytes is prothallus. Do not confuse it with protonema. Protonema is the unreal gametophyte of mosses, but prothallus is the gametophyte of pteridophytes, right? And one more important thing I'm just trying to tell you, just listen carefully. This word prothallus is used only for the gametophyte of homosporous species. That means the pteridophytes which are heterosporous, their gametophyte is not called as prothallus. That means the gametophyte of Selaginella, Salvinia, it will not be called as prothallus. The prothallus word is used for the gametophyte of homosporous species. If it has come in, if it comes in question, there is a match and prothallus is written in front of Salvinia, that would be a wrong match. Clear? Now, these are the lines of NCERT. Very important. What is the nature of gametophyte or prothallus in pteridophytes? Free living, obviously not dependent on anybody. Inconspicuous. Inconspicuous, that means not very developed, not very clear. Something which is very clear, dominant, is conspicuous, and something which is not properly developed, which is not clear, which is not distinct, is inconspicuous. So there is a box, there will be a box, and it will be, many words will be written, and you will have to choose how many words regarding the prothallus are correct. One of the word will be conspicuous. The word conspicuous will be wrong for the prothallus of pteridophytes. Inconspicuous, remember, it is small. Multicellular, gametophyte is always multicellular in all the plants. Mostly photosynthetic. There are few pteridophytes whose gametophyte can be saprophytic also. That is why NCERT has written mostly photosynthetic. And thalloid, you can see thalloid means not differentiated. Here in the diagram you can see this is the gametophyte, the prothallus of a fern, and it bears archegonia, the female sex organ, and the entheridium. Archegonia and the entheridium. Okay, so you can see here, beta, this is the gametophyte of pteridophytes, that is called as prothallus. Not very clear, not very distinct, so inconspicuous, small, and bear the sex organs archegonia and entheridia, and it bears the rhizoids. Right now, the reproduction in pteridophytes is just similar to that of bryophytes. What I have just told you, the gametophyte of pteridophytes also have entheridium and archegonium, multicellular sex organs, jacketed sex organs, just like bryophytes. Inside entheridia, antherozoids will be formed, male gametes will be formed. With the help of water, they will move towards archegonium. Inside archegonium, fertilization will happen, zygote will form, embryo forms sporophyte. Exactly same as bryophytes. So here the sexual reproduction in pteridophytes exactly same as bryophytes. What is the difference? The difference is in bryophytes, the male gametes or antherozoids were biflagellated, but here they are multiflagellated. They have multiflagellated male gametes. Otherwise, everything is similar. And one more difference. Sporophyte was attached with gametophyte in bryophytes, but here the sporophyte will detach from the gametophyte and will form an independent sporophyte in the soil. Clear? Yeah. Now, there is very important lines written in NCERT that you cannot see pteridophytes everywhere. I have just told you that you just have stepped out of your home and you cannot see the pteridophytes around. You see the angiosperms around, right? So the question comes, why pteridophytes have such a narrow geographical distribution? Why they are not found everywhere? Because there are two important reasons for it. First reason, because the gametophyte of pteridophytes show show tantrums. I will not grow everywhere. I have my specific requirements. The gametophyte of pteridophytes needs specific situations. particular amount of coolness, temperature, particular amount of, shadiness, no much light, particular amount of, moisture, then only we will grow. So because of the specific requirement of the gametophyte of pteridophytes, they are so, they are not found everywhere. And the second important point, they need water for fertilization. And it is not necessary that water is available everywhere, every time. So because of these two reasons, it's very important question, often comes. Because of these two reasons, the geographic distribution of pteridophytes is very narrow. They are not found everywhere. Okay, let's move on further. I hope this slide is clear to you all. Let's move on further. Now let's discuss something very important regarding the heterosporous pteridophytes. There are very few: Salvinia, Selaginella. What is special in these heterosporous pteridophytes? They will form two types of spores: microspores, megaspores. We know that sporophyte goes into the soil, germinate to give gametophyte. But here there are two types of spores. Microspores will germinate to give male gametophyte, and megaspores will germinate to give female gametophyte. That means they will have two kinds of gametophyte, male gametophyte and female gametophyte. What I have told you in the comparative table, that in case of gametophyte and angiosperms, the gametophyte is always present on the sporophyte. Remember in the comparative table, the pollen grains, the embryo sac, the endosperm, the gametophyte, male and female gametophyte in gametophyte and sporophyte, they are not present in the soil independently, but they are always found on sporophyte. Remember? In case of pteridophytes, male gametophyte will be found in the soil, but the female gametophyte will be present on the sporophyte. But not for the whole time, like in gymnosperms and angiosperms. After a point of time, the female gametophyte will also come into the soil. That means the female gametophyte of heterosporous pteridophytes have started to behave like the gametophyte of gymnosperms and angiosperms. Are you getting the point? In algae, bryophytes, and in most of the pteridophytes, what we have just read, that their gametophyte is present in the soil, bearing the sex organs, its independent unit, green, photosynthetic. But now, the female gametophyte in heterosporous pteridophyte is present on the sporophyte, like gymnosperms and angiosperms. But yes, that is true that it is not present for the whole time. After some point of time, it will go into the soil, but it has started, the female gametophyte has started to be present, on the sporophyte. And this is the advanced habit. See, lines of NCERT, important. Female gametophyte retains on parent sporophyte for variable periods. Variable periods means in some species like in Selaginella, it can, be present for a longer time. In Salvinia for shorter time, but ultimately they have to go into the soil for variable periods. That means the female gametophyte will not be present on the sporophyte for the whole time. Clear? And the development of young embryos, when this female gametophyte, we know that on the female gametophyte, archegonium will be present. Inside the archegonium, zygote will be formed, and that zygote will develop into young embryo. And what we have read up till now, that this gametophyte is present on the soil, and archegonium, inside archegonium, the development of the zygote into young embryo happens on the soil inside archegonium. But here, the female gametophyte is retained on the sporophyte, and the development of zygote into young embryo happens when this gametophyte is there on the sporophyte. Right? This is something like gymnosperms and angiosperms. So, this event, whatever is happening here, this or heterospory, that means formation of two different kinds of spores, and then megaspores giving rise to female gametophyte. Female gametophyte has started to be, to get retained on the sporophyte, and the development of the embryo occurs inside the gametophyte while it is retained on the sporophyte. This thing, this kind of habit is advanced habit, and it is the foundation, it is the starting, it is the precursor for the seed habit which will be found in gymnosperms and angiosperms. You know that seed are found in gymnosperms and angiosperms, right? So the beginning of the seed habit has the foundation, the starting of that is laid down in the heterosporous pteridophytes. The heterosporous pteridophytes have, they are like, we will start this thing. Seed will not be formed in them. In heterosporous pteridophytes, seed will not be formed. Seed will be formed in gymnosperms. But the requirements to form a seed, right, that is heterospory, and these conditions, they are, started here. So this event, lines of NCERT, this event and heterospory is a foundation, starting or precursor to seed habit, which is an important step in evolution. Because of this step, gymnosperms has been evolved, and then later on angiosperms. I hope these lines are clear to you. These are very important lines, right? Yeah. Now, classification of pteridophytes. According to NCERT, the pteridophytes are divided into 4 different classes, and those 4 different classes are: first class is Coelopsida. In this class, mainly fossil forms are there, and the example given is Coelotum. If they are given in NCERT, can come in NEET. The second class NCERT is saying is Lycopsida. The members of Lycopsida are Selaginella and Lycopodium. They are also called as club mosses, but they are not bryophytes, they are pteridophytes. So this is an example of false moss. Sphenopsida. The important member of the class Sphenopsida is Equisetum, and they're also called as horsetails. And you know why? Because they have a horsetail-like structure. Ferns, the most advanced pteridophytes, belong to the class Pteropsida, and the members are Dryopteris, Pteris, Adiantum, Azolla. Right? I was saying ferns. These are the ferns. Clear? So remember these 4 classes. They are important. Examples are important. Now these are the examples of NCERT given here. Important. Not examples, sorry, diagrams. This is the diagram of Selaginella. You should, recognize the things. This is Selaginella, the heterosporous pteridophyte. This is Equisetum, and you can see that it has a horsetail-like structure, distinct node and internode, and the underground stem, that is rhizome. This is a fern, grown as ornamentals, and this is Salvinia, the aquatic heterosporous pteridophyte. So these are the diagrams of NCERT, and you should recognize them, right? So I hope beta you understood pteridophytes well. Let's move on to gymnosperms now. So let's start with gymnosperms now. Gymnosperms, why they are called as gymnosperms? Gymno means naked and sperms mean seed. You generally know beta that seed are present inside the fruit. They are enclosed inside the fruit wall. But in gymnosperms, the seed are present behind the leaf, naked. They are not enclosed within the fruit or fruit wall. That is why they have naked seeds. And you know that in angiosperms, the ovules are present inside the ovary, right? But here, the ovules are present behind the leaves. They are not present inside the ovary or ovary wall. That is why they have naked ovules. So gymnosperms are called gymnosperms because they have naked seed and they have naked ovule. Now, I've just told you that the gymnosperms are large sized trees, right? Some of them are medium sized trees also. Some of them, very few form of them are shrubs also. But remember, no gymnosperm is a herb. No gymnosperm is a herbaceous plant. Remember this. And all the gymnosperms are perennial plants. That means they live for years. They do not live for few months or for one growing season only. They live for years. Okay. And the largest gymnosperm known is Sequoia, that is also called as redwood tree. Let's move on further. As we know that the dominant phase of life cycle of gymnosperms is sporophyte. So let's discuss the sporophyte of gymnosperms. We know that the long tree present in front of our eyes, that long large sized tree, is the sporophyte of the gymnosperm, which has root, leaf and stem. The root in case of gymnosperms are tap roots and they show secondary growth. What is secondary growth? We will deal it in anatomy. Secondary growth is girth, to increase in diameter. Stem is also woody in case of gymnosperms. It also shows secondary growth. And they have properly developed leaves. Now let's discuss some special point about each part of sporophyte. First, let's take the root. This question is very, very important. How the root of Pinus, you know, two important gymnosperms we'll be discussing are Pinus and Cycas. Okay. So, what is special about the root of Pinus? With the root of Pinus, fungi is associated, and that is why the Pinus has mycorrhizal roots. And the kind of mycorrhiza it has is ectomycorrhiza. That means fungal hyphae remain on the surface of root, do not enter into the root. That is endomycorrhiza. So remember, it can be a mismatch. If endomycorrhiza is written in front of Pinus, false. Ectomycorrhiza, correct. If it is written, then Pinus root is associated with blue-green algae, false. Pinus root is associated with fungi, and that too ectomycorrhiza. This is an obligate association. The Pinus seed cannot germinate in the absence of the particular fungi in the soil. If that fungi is not present in the soil, the seed of the Pinus will not germinate. This is a kind of obligate relationship. They both cannot live with each other. Okay. How root of Cycas is special? Cycas has a special type of roots called as coralloid roots. And with these roots, there's a special organism associated, and that is cyanobacteria or blue-green algae, Anabina. And this Anabina fixes nitrogen inside the Cycas, and Cycas gives shelter to this algae. So please, remember this very important question can be there. Pinus root associated with fungi, mycorrhiza, ectomycorrhiza. Cycas root associated with blue-green algae, Anabina. Clear? Let's move. Now discuss the stem. Yes. This is again important. If the stem has lateral branching, that means it is branched. But the Cycas, the stem of the Cycas does not have any lateral branching. It bears leaves at the top. Right? So, the stem of Cycas is unbranched and the stem of Pinus is branched. This question can come directly. Now let's go to leaf. You know, this we will deal in morphology, that leaf can be simple and leaf can be compound. The leaf of Pinus is simple. How will you remember it? Sci-pi. Sci-pi. So leaf of Pinus is simple. But C for Cycas, C for compound. The leaf of Cycas is compound. And compound leaf can be further of two types, pinnately and palmately. But the leaf of Cycas is pinnately compound leaf. Okay. Now, the leaf of gymnosperms, all the gymnosperms are very special because they are well adapted. They can tolerate high temperature, they can tolerate high humidity, and they can tolerate high wind velocity. So they are well adapted for these conditions. And moreover, the gymnosperms are found in hilly areas where there can be scarcity of water. So to prevent the loss of water, the leaf has special morphological features. The stomata are not exposed, but they are sunken. They are embedded into the epidermis. So they have sunken stomata and they have a very thick covering of cuticle. Cuticle is a waxy covering impermeable to water. So special feature of the leaf of gymnosperm is they have thick cuticle and sunken stomata to prevent the loss of water. Direct question can come. Adaptations in gymnosperm to prevent loss of water, sunken stomata, thick cuticle. Lines of NCERT, important. Okay, now let's move on to the sporophyll. Now I don't have to explain this. You understand what is a sporophyll. A leaf which bears sporangia. But in case of gymnosperms, the sporophylls are further of two types. They can be small leaves, small leaf which bear small sporangium. They are called as microsporophyll, and the sporangium behind them are called as microsporangium. But the bigger leaves have bigger sporangia. So they are called as megasporophylls, which bear bigger sporangium, megasporangium. And do not forget this, that another name of megasporangium is ovule. Ovule. That means behind larger leaves, ovules are present, which are enclosed in ovary in case of angiosperms. Clear? Now understand this thing, beta. All these small leaves which bear microsporangia, they may aggregate together. They may come together to form a group. And if the microsporophylls form a group, that will be called as male cone or male strobili. But if the megasporophylls, the bigger leaves, they form a group, then that would be a female cone or a female strobili. Understand this. Collection of microsporophylls. This is not microphyll. This is microsporophyll. Leaves which bear small sporangia. That is microsporangium. Okay. So collection of microsporophylls is a male cone, and the collection of megasporophylls is female cone. Clear? Now let's move on. Pinus is bisexual. How will you remember this? Pi, bi. Pi, bi. Pinus is bisexual. That means on the plant of Pinus, on the same plant, both male cone and female cone will be there. Male cone, female cone, both will be present on the same plant. Bisexual. And the another name of bisexual is monoecious. This is opposite. Monoecious, bisexual. Okay. Yeah. So here you can see the beautiful diagram. When you go to the hilly areas, you can see these cones spread all over the forest. This is the female cone of the Pinus, and this is the male cone of the Pinus present on the same plant, right? In case of Cycas, the male cone is present on the different plant and the megasporophylls are present on the different plant. Have you listened the statement properly? I have not used the term female cone. I have just said male cone on different plant, megasporophylls on different plant. That means in case of Cycas, megasporophylls do not aggregate to form female cone. The megasporophylls are present separately, right? That is why I have written that megasporophylls may aggregate. Megasporophylls may, it is not necessary. So in case of Cycas, the megasporophylls, they do not aggregate to form female cone. Remember this point. In Cycas, female cone is absent, but they have megasporophylls and ovule, but those megasporophylls do not collect to form female cone. Correct? So Cycas is unisexual or dioecious. These questions come directly, beta, directly. Clear? Megasporophylls on separate plant and male cone on separate plant. This you can see here in the diagram. This is the male cone of Cycas. Now let's move further. Now let's go to the how gametophyte gets developed in case of gymnosperms. Let's understand that. Let's go to the male cone. Male cone, whether it is present on same plant or different plant. Let's go to the male cone. So this is a male cone, right? Which is a collection of microsporophyll. So I have taken out a single microsporophyll, that is a small leaf from this collection male cone. On the microphyll, there will be microsporangium. inside the microsporangium, meiosis will occur. We know this, beta. We know this, that in the sporophyte, meiosis occurs, leads to the formation of gametophyte. So after meiosis, what will be formed here? After meiosis, microspores will be formed, which will be haploid. And these microspores will form the male gametophyte called as pollen grain. So pollen grain is the male gametophyte, highly reduced. Remember the table? Highly reduced, some celled structure. Clear? Yes. Now let's understand what is happening in the female cone. The female cone, collection of megasporophyll. We have taken a single megasporophyll out. Behind megasporophyll, there are megasporangium or ovule. Let's understand the structure of ovule. The ovule of gymnosperm has a single protective covering called as integument, right? Single, not double. Angiosperms have double, two integuments. But in gymnosperms, the integument is single. That is unitegmic condition. This condition is called as unitegmic condition, right? And inside the integument, there is a mass of cell. There is a parenchymatous tissue filled in, and that is called as nucellus. Nucellus. This is ovule. Integument, and inside integument, nucellus. Okay. So if the nucellus is not surrounded by integument, you cannot call it as ovule. You will just call it megasporangium. But in case of gymnosperm, we call megasporangium as ovule because here nucellus is surrounded by integument. So this composite structure, when nucellus is surrounded by integument, this composite structure can be called as ovule. And inside the ovule, one single cell of nucellus, listen carefully, one single cell of nucellus enlarge and forms megaspore mother cell. In this megaspore mother cell, meiosis occur to form 4 megaspores. Out of 4, 3 degenerate and only 1 is left. Clear? I hope up till here the things are clear. Megasporophyll, megasporangium, ovule, structure of ovule, inside ovule, megaspore mother cell is formed. Out of 4 megaspores, 3 has degenerated. Now, we are left with this single functional megaspore. One functional megaspore which is haploid, and we know that microspore will form male gametophyte, that is pollen grain, and megaspore will form female gametophyte, that is the endosperm. So this functional megaspore undergo many free nuclear division. What are free nuclear division? Kind of division in which only karyokinesis occur. Only nucleus will keep on dividing, and then ultimately cytoplasm will divide to form a multicellular haploid structure, and that is called as endosperm. So in case of gymnosperms, the endosperm is formed from megaspore, and this multicellular structure which is formed from megaspore is called as endosperm, which is the another name of female gametophyte. Do not confuse this endosperm with the endosperm of angiosperms. Opposite, just opposite. In angiosperm, endosperm forms after fertilization, and that is triploid, right? But here in gymnosperms, it is formed before fertilization and is haploid and is called as the female gametophyte. Clear? Yeah. Then later on this endosperm, the female sex organs, that is archegonia, gets developed. And on each endosperm, yani ki in a single ovule, imagine this is the ovule. Inside the ovule, now what has formed? The endosperm. And on the endosperm, 2 to 8 archegonia are developed, and inside each archegonia there is an egg cell. Remember, I have told you in the important terminology what are archegoniates. So bryophytes, pteridophytes and gymnosperms are archegoniates because they have archegonium. Remember, Gymnosperms do not have antheridium. The male gametophyte is pollen grain, and on pollen grain, male sex organ antheridium is absent. But on female gametophyte, endosperm, archegonium is present, the female sex organ. Clear? So there is no antheridium in gymnosperms, but yes, there is archegonium. Clear? Now, what will happen? Pollen grain is formed on the in the male cone, and the archegonia with egg cell are formed in the female cone. Now what will happen? These pollen grain will come to the archegonium with the help of wind. That means in gymnosperms, wind pollination is seen. And the another name of wind pollination is called as anemophily. Anemo doesn't mean animal, okay? Anemophily is wind pollination. Clear? Now these pollen grains, with the help of wind or air, they are taken to the ovule. Imagine a big leaf on which ovule are present, like this. Okay, this is the ovule present behind the big leaf. Inside the ovule, female gametophyte, that is endosperm, has just been formed. On the endosperm, the female sex organ archegonium has been developed, in which egg cell are waiting for the pollen grain. The pollen grain will come on the ovule and will form pollen tube. See, pollen tube. This is the first time when pollen tube is getting formed, and this habit is called as siphonogamy. Formation of pollen tube is called as siphonogamy, first seen in gymnosperm. Clear? So this pollen grain will form pollen tube, which carry the male gamete. Then fertilization will occur inside the archegonium, and after fertilization, we call this ovule as seed. The fertilized ovule is called as seed, which is present behind the leaf in the female cone, not inside the fruit. Clear? So this is how seeds are formed. I hope this is clear to you all. Now, in the NCERTs, there is diagram of cycas, there is diagram of spinous, and there is diagram of ginkgo biloba. Ginkgo biloba, sorry, this should be small. Ginkgo biloba is a gymnosperm which has two types of shoot. You can see in your NCERTs with the labeling, long shoot and dwarf shoot. So remember this point comes directly. Neatum, yes. Remember in the comparative table I have told you that in gymnosperms, vessels are absent. Neatum is a gymnosperm which belong to the order Nettales, and this is a very special type of gymnosperm because it has started behaving like angiosperms. So this is an exceptional case. Vessels are present in this gymnosperm, generally absent. The ovule of gymnosperm is unitegmic, but it has two integuments, so it is bitegmic. Archegonium is present in gymnosperms, but here it is absent. So these are angiospermic features present in the gymnosperm neatum. Okay. So this is the gymnosperm which shows the exceptional features. Clear? And one more thing, that the male gametes of gymnosperms, the male gametes of gymnosperms are non-motile. Egg is also non-motile and male gametes are also non-motile because they do not need water now. They are carried with the help of pollen tube. But there is an exception, and the exception is cycas. Cycas is called as the living fossil. And why it is called as the living fossil? Because it shows some primitive characters. And what is that primitive characters? It has motile male gametes. It has motile male gametes. Okay? Clear? So this is all about gymnosperms. I hope things are clear to you. Now comes angiosperms, the most advanced plants of the whole plant kingdom. In the whole plant kingdom, fruit and flower is only present in angiosperms, nowhere else. Right? Angiosperms, as you know, they are of two types, monocots and dicots. And the smallest angiosperm is Wolffia. It just appear as green dots on the water. Green dots. See, so imagine it is microscopic angiosperm. And the largest or longest angiosperm is the eucalyptus. Okay. Now, you know that we will study the detail of angiosperms in the sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Here, there is just a glimpse of it. You know that the male gametophyte in case of angiosperms is pollen grain, but the female gametophyte in case of angiosperm is embryo sac. And you know what is embryo sac? It is 7-celled, 8-nucleated structure having 3 antipodals towards chalaza, egg, cells and synergids toward micropyle and 2 polar nuclei. And you know that double fertilization is only and only the character of angiosperm in the whole plant kingdom. What is double fertilization? Inside the female gametophyte, one of the male gametes fuses with the egg cell to form zygote, which ultimately forms embryo. And the other male gamete fuses with the polar nuclei. This is called as triple fusion to form pen, primary endosperm nucleus, and that ultimately forms endosperm. But this endosperm is triploid. But in case of angiosperms, the endosperm was haploid and also called as female gametophyte. Clear? So remember this point. And the further detail of angiosperms will be dealing in sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Okay. Now let's discuss about the life cycles. On the last chapter of NCERT, life cycles are given. 3 types of life cycles are given: haplontic, haplodiplontic, and diplontic. Haplontic life cycle is a cycle in which the gametophytic stage, here N stands for gametophyte and 2N stands for sporophyte, right? So in haplontic life cycle, the gametophytic stage is for longer time and the sporophytic stage is for shorter time, and obviously the dominant phase of life cycle is gametophyte, and this kind of cycle is seen in algae. But in haplodiplontic life cycle, you can see here that both 2N and N stages, that is sporophytic and gametophytic stages, are seen for almost equal times. But in case of bryophytes, haploid stage, that is gametophytic stage, is dominant, and in case of pteridophytes, sporophytic stage is dominant. Haplodiplontic life cycle is seen in bryophytes and pteridophytes, but the difference is here gametophytic stage is dominant, here sporophytic stage is dominant. And both of them, N and 2N stages, are seen for equal times in the life cycle. Then comes the diplontic life cycle. Yes, where sporophytic stage is for longer time and gametophytic stage is for shorter time, and obviously the dominant phase is sporophytic stage, seen in the advanced plants, Gymnosperms and Angiosperms. The diagrams are given in NCERT, you can see it. Now, I have just told you that algae show haplontic life cycle, but there are some exceptions and these are important. Learn with me. Ectocarpus, which is a brown algae, kelps, brown algae, Polysiphonia, red algae. These 3 algae show haplodiplontic life cycle. Fucus, which is a brown algae, show diplontic life cycle. Generally, algae show haplontic life cycle, but these are the exceptions, and learn them properly. Okay? So I hope you all have understood the chapter well, and I have tried my level best that no line of NCERT and no concept of NCERT should be left. So beta, if you want to prepare this chapter from NEET, learn your NCERT, read your NCERT line by line with all of the diagrams. Listen to this lecture very carefully, line by line, understand things, imagine things, make your concept clear, and you are ready for NEET. Nothing else needs to be done. And the PDF, whatever is written here, the whole PDF is available on the PW app under the batch CBSE Board Festival, right? You will go to the PW app, you will click on the batch, You will go to all batches in the app. Then you will click on the CBSE board festival. When you will click, you will go to the biology section, and then you will go to the lecture. The lecture is Plant Kingdom. When you will open it, you will get the PDF of the notes. So no tension. NCRT notes, learn these, focus on the lecture, and you will be ready for NEET, and solve questions as much as you can. Thank you. I hope this would help you. Thank you all.